The storm hit 3 hours before sunset, turning the mountain pass into a wall of white static. Garrett Cole had seen worse weather in his 15 years working search and rescue in the Cascade Range, but he still respected the fury of nature enough to batten down early. He sealed the shutters on his clinic cabin, stoked the wood stove until it roared with heat, and settled in with a mug of coffee and a medical journal he'd been meaning to finish for 2 months. That was when he heard the scratching at his door. Not knocking, scratching, like claws on wood. Garrett set down his mug and moved to the gun cabinet, pulling out his hunting rifle more from habit than fear. Bears occasionally wandered too close when food ran scarce, though they usually avoided human structures. He checked the load, flicked on the exterior floodlight, and cracked open the door. The cold hit him first, bitter and sharp enough to make his eyes water. The second thing he noticed was the blood. It stained the snow in dark ribbons leading up to his porch, where a figure lay crumpled against the doorframe. Not a bear, human-shaped, but wrong in ways his brain struggled to process. The body was tall and lean, covered in sleek charcoal fur marked with crimson stripes that looked like war paint. A tail, thick and muscular, lay motionless in the snow, pointed ears, flattened against a skull that was too angular to be fully human but too expressive to be animal, and around her neck, a metal collar flashing with intermittent red lights. Garrett's training kicked in before his fear could. He slung the rifle over his shoulder, crouched down and pressed 2 fingers to the side of her throat. Pulse. Thready and weak. But there. Her skin was cold, fur matted with ice and blood from a wound in her side. The collar beeped once, a soft electronic whine that made her twitch even in unconsciousness. He didn't think about what she was or where she came from. He just thought about the fact that something living was dying on his porch, and he had the skills to stop it. Garrett hooked his arms under her shoulders and dragged her inside, grunting with effort. She was heavier than she looked, dense with muscle. He kicked the door shut and hauled her onto the exam table he kept in the corner of the main room. Her breathing was shallow, lips tinged blue beneath the fur. First priority, hypothermia. He stripped away the tactical vest she wore, revealing the puncture wound in her lower ribs. Claws, not bullets. Something had fought her hand to hand. He grabbed thermal blankets from the supply cabinet and wrapped her torso, then cranked the portable heater and aimed it at the table. Second priority, that collar. Up close, he could see it was a shock device, the kind used for livestock control or prisoner restraint. Every few seconds it pulsed, sending a visible spasm through her muscles. It was keeping her weak, preventing her body from healing or even staying warm. Garrett retrieved his wire cutters and examined the locking mechanism. Military grade, tamper-resistant. If he cut the wrong wire, it might deliver a lethal charge. He studied it for 30 seconds, tracing the power line to the battery pack on the underside, then made his decision. He snipped the red wire first, then the black. The collar hissed, sparked once, and went dark. Her body sagged with relief even though she was still unconscious. Third priority, the wound. He cleaned it with antiseptic, noting how the tissue beneath the fur was denser than human flesh, almost rubbery. The bleeding had slowed on its own, which meant her biology had some kind of accelerated clotting. He stitched it anyway, working quickly and efficiently. When he finished, he stepped back and finally let himself breathe. She looked almost peaceful now, wrapped in blankets with her breathing evening out. Her face was strikingly humanoid, with high cheekbones and a strong jaw, but her eyes when closed showed the faint outline of a second eyelid. Predator biology. Built for hunting. Garrett washed his hands and poured himself another coffee, this one spiked with whiskey. Whatever she wasn't military. The gear she wore was mismatched and repurposed, and the collar told him she'd been a prisoner. Escaped, maybe. Running from something. He glanced out the window at the storm. If she'd made it this far in, this weather, whoever was chasing her wasn't far behind. She woke 2 hours later. Garrett was sitting in the chair across from the exam table, rifle across his lap, when her eyes snapped open. They were yellow, bright and feral, with slit pupils that contracted immediately in the lamplight. She bolted upright, grabbed the edge of the table and snarled. The sound was low and guttural, more animal than human, and every muscle in her body coiled like a spring ready to release. Garrett didn't move. He kept his hands visible, rifle pointed at the floor. "Easy," he said calmly. "You're safe. You were hurt." Her eyes darted around the room, taking in the cabin, the medical supplies, the locked door. Then she looked down at herself, at the bandages and blankets, and finally at her neck. Her hand flew to where the collar had been, fingers tracing the raw skin underneath. "You removed it," she said. Her voice was rough, accented in a way he couldn't place. "Why?" "Because it was killing you." She stared at him for a long moment, evaluating. Her breathing slowed, and the tension in her shoulders eased slightly. "I am Nix Garrett." She nodded once, then winced and pressed a hand to her side. "How long?" 2 hours. "You lost blood, but the wound is clean. You'll heal if you rest." "I cannot rest." Her eyes flicked to the window. "They are coming." "Who?" Nix swung her, legs off the table, testing her weight. She was steady enough, though she moved carefully. "The Ashenvale Collective. My former handlers. They will have tracked the collar signal before it died." Garrett felt his jaw tighten. "You're saying someone's coming here? Tonight?" "Yes." Her gaze met his, unflinching. "I did not mean to bring danger to you. If you wish, I will leave now." "In this storm? You'll die in an hour. Better than what they will do to me." Garrett stood, slinging the rifle over his shoulder. "What exactly did you do to make them this angry?" Nix hesitated, then exhaled slowly through her nose. "I was created to hunt and kill. Engineered from predator genetics and trained from birth. They gave me targets and I eliminated them without question, until the last one." "What happened?" "The target was a child, a political dissident's daughter, 6 years old. They told me she would grow to be a threat. I refused the order." She looked down at her claws, flexing them slowly. "So they collared me, sent me to reconditioning. I escaped 3 days ago." Garrett absorbed that, his mind racing. If what she was saying was true, then she wasn't just running from trackers. She was running from an entire organization built around creating living weapons, and now they'd followed her here. He moved to the window and pulled back the curtain. The storm was worse now, visibility down to almost nothing, but through the swirling snow he saw it, a light, small and red, moving slowly up the mountain path. Someone was already here. Garrett let the curtain fall and turned to Nix. "How many?" She closed her eyes, tilting her head slightly. Her ears swiveled, picking up sounds he couldn't hear. "1. A scout. The others will be an hour behind. Can you fight?" Nix opened her eyes, and something cold and dangerous flickered there. "Always." "Good." Garrett moved to the gun cabinet and pulled out a second rifle, checking the load. "Because I'm not in the habit of letting people die on my watch. And I sure as hell don't hand anyone over to people who collar them like animals." Nix stared at him, something unreadable crossing her face. Then she nodded slowly. "Thank you." "Don't thank me yet." He tossed her a tactical knife from his belt. "We survive this, then you can thank me." They moved through the cabin in silence, Garrett directing her to cover the side windows while he took the front. He killed the interior lights and used the glow from the stove to navigate. Outside, the red light was closer now, bobbing steadily through the snow. Garrett's heart hammered in his chest, but his hands were steady. He'd been out of active service for 5 years, but the instincts never left. He checked his sightline, controlled his breathing, and waited. The figure emerged from the storm like a ghost, tall and broad, wrapped in white tactical gear that blended with the snow. The red light came from a scanner attached to their helmet, sweeping back and forth. Tracking. The figure stopped 20 feet from the cabin and raised one arm. A synthesized voice cut through the wind, amplified and emotionless. "Nix, of the Ashenvale Collective. Your signal has been traced to this location. Surrender yourself or the human sheltering you will be eliminated. Garrett glanced at Nyx. She crouched by the side window, claws extended, eyes locked on the figure outside. Her tail lashed once behind her. He turned back to the window and made his decision. He wasn't surrendering anyone. The shot cracked through the storm like thunder and the figure outside jerked backward. Garrett's bullet struck the scanner on their helmet, shattering it in a spray of sparks and plastic. Not a kill shot, but enough to blind their tracking. The figure staggered, then dropped into a crouch and returned fire. The window exploded inward, glass shredding the curtains. Garrett rolled away from the frame, already moving to his secondary position behind the overturned exam table. Nyx moved faster. She crossed the room in 3 bounds and kicked open the side door, disappearing into the white chaos outside before Garrett could shout a warning. He cursed under his breath and fired twice more through the broken window, forcing the attacker to stay down. Then he heard it, the sound of impact, bodies colliding in the snow followed by a roar that was definitely not human. Garrett grabbed his backup pistol and rushed to the side door, bracing himself against the cold. The storm swallowed everything, beyond 10 feet, but he could make out shapes moving in the darkness. Nyx had tackled the figure and they were grappling in the deep snow, a blur of claws and tactical armor. She was faster, but the attacker was strong. They threw her off and drew a curved blade from their belt, the metal glinting in the scattered light from the cabin. Nyx rolled to her feet, circling, tail lashing for balance. Garrett raised his pistol but couldn't get a clear shot. They moved, too fast, too close together. The attacker lunged. Nyx dodged left and raked her claws across their arm, shredding the sleeve and drawing blood. The figure grunted but didn't slow. They reversed the blade and slashed upward. Nyx twisted away, but not fast enough. The tip caught her shoulder, opening a shallow cut. Garrett made his decision. He aimed low and fired 3 times at the snow near the attacker's feet. The bullets kicked up ice and powder, disorienting them for just a second. It was enough. Nyx closed the distance and drove her claws into the gap between the helmet and chest plate, finding flesh. The attacker spasmed once and collapsed into the snow, blood spreading dark against the white. Nyx stood over the body, breathing hard, steam rising from her fur. Then she looked up at Garrett, eyes glowing in the dim light. "More are coming," she said. "How many?" She tilted her head, listening. 3. Maybe 4. Close now. Garrett pulled her back toward the cabin. "Inside. We fortify and wait." She followed without argument, and together they dragged the dead attacker's body inside. Garrett searched it quickly, finding a radio, 2 spare magazines, and a datapad locked with biometric security. He pocketed everything and slammed the door shut, throwing the heavy deadbolt. Nyx moved to the broken window and began stacking furniture, creating a makeshift barricade. Her movements were efficient, military. Whoever trained her had done it well. "Tell me about them," Garrett said as he reloaded his rifle. "You're hunters. What are we up against?" Nyx paused, her hands still on a wooden chair. The one outside was a tracker, low rank, expendable. The others will be enforcers. Ravek leads them. He is cold, precise. He will not make mistakes. And the others? Senna is his lieutenant. Fast, deadly. She paused, something crossing her face. "We trained together as younglings. Before I refused my orders, she was my friend. Will she hesitate?" Nyx's expression hardened. "No, she has never disobeyed a command in her life." Garrett absorbed that and checked his ammunition. 2 magazines left for the rifle, 1 for the pistol. Not great odds if they were about to face trained killers. He glanced at the wood stove and then at the propane tank in the corner. An idea began forming. "How good is their thermal vision?" he asked. "Excellent. They can track heat signatures through walls. Then we make them see what we want them to see." 15 minutes later, the cabin was a trap. Garrett had cranked the wood stove until it roared, filling the main room with oppressive heat. He positioned electric heaters in the back rooms, creating false signatures. Then he and Nyx retreated to the cold storage cellar beneath the kitchen, a stone room that stayed just above freezing year-round. They left the cellar door cracked, giving them a narrow sight line to the main room above. Nyx crouched beside him, in the darkness, her breathing shallow and controlled. Garrett could feel the heat radiating from her body, her metabolism burning high from the fight. She smelled like cold earth and something sharper, more primal. "They will sweep the structure. First," she whispered. "Check for traps. Ravek is cautious." "Good. Let them think we're stupid enough to hide in the obvious places." They waited in silence. Minutes stretched. Then Garrett heard it. The subtle creak of a floorboard on the porch. No wind could make that sound. Someone was testing their weight, moving carefully. 3 soft clicks followed. Hand signals. Military coordination. Then the door exploded inward, not from a battering ram, from a shaped charge precisely placed to shred the lock and hinges. The blast was deafening in the confined space and smoke billowed into the cabin. 3 figures entered in formation. The first was massive, nearly 7 feet tall, covered in dark fur marked with silver streaks. Ravek. He carried a rifle that looked custom-made, sleek and brutal. His eyes scanned the room with mechanical precision. Behind him came 2 others. One was lean and quick, moving like liquid shadow. Senna. Her fur was deep red, almost burgundy, and her eyes were sharp and calculating. The third was stockier, armored heavy, carrying a shotgun. They swept the main room in seconds, checking corners and covering angles. Ravek gestured to the back rooms, and Senna moved silently toward them, while the third enforcer held position, in D. The cellar. Garrett's finger rested on the trigger. Beside him, Nyx was utterly still, watching Senna's approach with an expression he couldn't read. Senna disappeared into the back hallway. Garrett heard her footsteps, careful and measured. She would find the heaters soon, realize the trick. He looked at Nyx and mouthed, "Now." She shook her head. "Wait." Senna's voice called out from the back, speaking in a language Garrett didn't understand. Ravek responded, his tone flat and emotionless. The third enforcer moved toward the cellar door. Garrett's heart hammered. The enforcer was 5 feet away. 4. 3. Nyx exploded from the cellar like a coiled spring. She hit the enforcer at chest height, driving him backward into the wall with enough force to crack the wood paneling. Her claws found his throat before he could raise the shotgun. He went down gurgling, blood spraying across the floor. Ravek spun and fired. The bullet passed so close to Nyx's head that Garrett saw fur fly. She rolled behind the overturned table. As Garrett rose from the cellar and fired 3 times at Ravek's center mass, 2 shots hit armor and ricocheted. The third caught him in the shoulder, spinning him halfway around. But he didn't go down. He returned fire, forcing Garrett back into the cellar entrance. Senna burst from the hallway, taking in the scene in an instant. Her eyes locked on Nyx, and something flickered there. Recognition. Regret. Then it was gone, replaced by cold professionalism. She drew twin combat knives and advanced. Nyx met her halfway. They collided in a blur of claws and blades, moving so fast Garrett could barely track them. They knew each other's movements, anticipated each strike. It was like watching a deadly dance, perfectly choreographed and utterly brutal. Garrett didn't have time to watch. Ravek was advancing on his position, rifle raised. Garrett fired twice, more missing both times as Ravek moved with surprising agility for his size. Then his rifle clicked empty. He dropped it and drew his pistol, but Ravek was already on him. A massive hand grabbed Garrett's wrist and twisted. He heard something. Crack felt white-hot pain shoot up his arm. The pistol clattered to the floor. Ravek lifted him by the throat, squeezing. His eyes were cold and yellow, devoid of mercy. "Foolish human," Ravek said, his voice like gravel. "You die for nothing." Garrett's vision started to gray at the edges. He clawed at Ravek's hand, but it was like trying to bend steel. His lungs burned. His broken wrist screamed. Then he remembered the knife on his belt. With his good hand, Garrett drew the blade and drove it into Ravek's armpit, where the armor didn't cover. He felt it sink deep, grinding against bone. Garrett raised his rifle, sighted carefully, and fired. Ravek roared and dropped him. Garrett collapsed, gasping, his throat on fire. He scrambled backward, searching for his pistol. Across the room, Nix and Senna had separated, both bleeding from multiple cuts. They circled each other, tails lashing. Senna spoke first, her voice tight. "You were supposed to be the best of us, Nix. Why did you betray everything we built?" "I betrayed nothing," Nix replied. "I remembered what we were before they made us into weapons. I remembered when we chose to protect, not just to kill. We protect the collective. You protect Director Voss's ambitions." Nix's voice was hard. "When did you stop thinking for yourself, Senna? When did you become just another tool?" Something cracked in Senna's expression. For just a moment, doubt flickered across her face. Then Ravek, still standing despite the knife wound, raised his rifle toward Garrett's head. "Enough," he growled. "The human dies. Then you come with us, Nix. Dead or alive, Director Voss does not care which." Garrett found his pistol and raised it, but his broken wrist made aiming nearly impossible. He was going to die. He could see it in Ravek's eyes. Senna moved, not toward Nix, toward Ravek. Her knife flashed once, twice, 3 times faster than thought. Ravek turned in shock as his rifle fell from nerveless fingers. Blood poured from his throat, his chest, his gut. He looked at Senna with something like betrayal in his eyes, then collapsed forward and didn't move again. The cabin fell silent except for labored breathing. Senna stood over Ravek's body, knives dripping red. She looked at Nix, then at Garrett, then back to Nix. "I am tired of being a tool," she said quietly. Nix stared at her former friend, wariness and hope warring in her expression. Outside, the storm began to fade, and the first gray light of dawn crept through the broken windows. But they all knew this wasn't over. Not yet. The silence stretched like a wire pulled too tight, ready to snap. Garrett sat against the wall, cradling his broken wrist, watching 2 engineered predators stand perfectly, still in his destroyed cabin. Blood pooled beneath Ravek's massive body, spreading dark across the floorboards. The dead enforcer by the cellar door had stopped twitching. The tracker outside was already frozen in the snow. 3 bodies, 3 killers sent by an organization that treated life like a commodity and conscience like a defect. Senna still held her knives, though they were lowered now. Her chest rose and fell rapidly, breath steaming in the cold air that poured through the shattered door. She looked at Nix with an expression Garrett couldn't quite read, something between defiance and desperation. "This does not make us allies," Senna said finally. Her voice was measured but strained. "I did not do this for you." Nix tilted her head slightly, ears swiveling forward. "Then why?" "Because I listened when you refused your last mission." Senna's jaw tightened. "I told myself you were weak, that you had lost your purpose, but I kept thinking about that child. 6 years old. Her crime was being born to the wrong family." She lowered the knives completely, letting them hang at her sides. "I have eliminated 47 targets for the collective. Insurgents, spies, political threats. I never questioned my orders. Not once." She looked at Ravek's corpse. "Until tonight, when Ravek called you an abomination. When he said your conscience was a flaw that needed to be purged, and I realized he was describing me too." Nix took a careful step forward. Senna tensed but didn't raise her weapons. "You are not an abomination," Nix said quietly. "You are what they could not break, what they could not fully control. I killed for them willingly, so did I, until I did not." Garrett cleared his throat, drawing their attention. His voice came out hoarse from the choking. "This is touching, really, but we have a bigger problem." He gestured with his good hand toward the broken door. "They sent 3 hunters. When none of them report back, they will send more. And next time, it would not be just enforcers." Senna nodded grimly. "Director Voss will escalate. He will authorize a full retrieval team, 20 operatives, air support. He cannot afford to let Nix remain free. She knows too much about the program." "What program?" Garrett asked. "Project Ashen," Nix said. "The creation and deployment of hybrid soldiers for covert operations." We were the prototype generation, 20 of us, engineered from predator genetics and trained from infancy. The collective planned to expand, to create hundreds more, to sell us to the highest bidders as the perfect untraceable weapons. Garrett felt his stomach turn. You are talking about breeding slaves. We are talking about profit, Senna corrected bitterly. Director Voss secured contracts with 4 governments before the first batch reached maturity. We were supposed to be his legacy, his empire, and Nick screwed that up by growing a conscience. By proving we are not tools, Nick said. By showing that engineering can create intelligence but cannot remove free will. She looked at Senna. You just proved it too. Senna closed her eyes briefly, then opened them and sheathed her knives. So what now? We cannot run forever. Voss has resources across 12 systems. He will hunt us until we are dead or the collective falls apart. Then we make him fall apart, Garrett said. Both of them looked at him. He pushed himself to his feet, grimacing at the pain in his wrist. You said Nix knows too much. That means she has evidence, information, things Voss does not want made public. Nix nodded slowly. Training records, financial transactions, client lists. I copied them before I escaped. The data is encrypted and stored on a remote server. Where? She tapped the side of her head. The coordinates are here. Only I can access them. Garrett smiled, despite the pain. Then we use it. We contact every oversight agency, every ethics board, every investigative journalist who would pay attention. We burn Project Ashen to the ground and take Voss down with it. Senna shook her head. You do not understand how deep this goes. Voss has allies in Union Command, people who approve the funding. They will bury any investigation. Then we do not. Give them a choice. Garrett moved to the overturned table and grabbed the datapad he had taken from the first tracker. We make it public. All of it. Upload it to open networks where it cannot be erased. Let the whole galaxy see what the Ashenvale Collective really is. Nix and Senna exchanged a glance. That would destroy the collective entirely, Senna said. Not just Project Ashen. Everything. Hundreds of legitimate operations would collapse. Good, Garrett said flatly. Any organization that thinks it is acceptable to breed sentient beings as weapons deserves to collapse. Senna was quiet for a moment, then she surprised him by nodding. You are right. A low beep interrupted them. All 3 froze. The sound came from Ravek's body. Senna moved quickly, crouching beside him and searching his gear. She found a tactical communicator clipped to his belt, its screen flashing red. Her expression went cold. Emergency protocol. If enforcers do not report in every 2 hours, command assumes compromise. She checked the timer. We have 40 minutes, before the retrieval team deploys. That is not enough time to reach a proper uplink station, Nick said. Garrett was already moving, ignoring the pain in his wrist. There is an old firewatch tower 3 miles north. It has a satellite relay. If we can get there and boost the signal, we can upload your data before they arrive. In this terrain? Senna looked skeptical. With you injured? Then I will slow you down and you will leave me behind, Garrett said sharply. But I am not sitting here waiting for more killers to show up. He grabbed his coat and started shoving supplies into a pack. First aid, ammunition, emergency rations. Nix stepped in front of him and placed a hand on his chest, stopping him. No one is leaving anyone behind. Her eyes met his, and Garrett saw the certainty there. The same certainty that had made her refuse an order to kill a child. The same strength that had driven her across hostile territory to escape her creators. We move together, Nix said. Or not at all. Senna picked up the spare rifle and checked its load. Then we need to move fast. They left through the back door, abandoning the cabin to its dead. The storm had passed, leaving the world crystalline and bright under a pale dawn sky. Snow crunched beneath their boots as they moved uphill, following the ridgeline toward the old fire tower. Garrett led them along paths he knew from years of search and rescue work, places where the snow was shallower and the footing more stable. His wrist throbbed with every step, but he pushed through it. Behind him, Nyx moved with liquid grace, her injured shoulder barely slowing her. Senna brought up the rear, rifle ready, eyes scanning constantly for threats. They were halfway to the tower when Garrett heard it. The distant thrum of engines. Helicopters. Coming fast. They spotted us, Senna said flatly. How? Garrett asked. Thermal satellites. Voss must have authorized full surveillance. They ran. The fire tower came into view 5 minutes later, a skeletal structure of metal rising above the trees. It looked abandoned, half collapsed, but Garrett knew the relay station at the top was still functional. He had used it himself during emergencies. The helicopters were louder now, close enough that Garrett could hear the individual rotors. 2 of them, maybe 3. Climb, he shouted. They hit the tower stairs at full speed. The metal groaned beneath their combined weight, rust flaking away. Garrett took the steps 2 at a time despite his injury, driven by adrenaline and desperation. Above him, Nyx and Senna moved like shadows, faster and more agile. They reached the platform as the first helicopter crested the ridge. It was black and unmarked, with mounted guns on both sides.